Good morning and welcome to the TC Dojo. Today we're talking about concepts and techniques of library science, or how library science can help improve your life and the lives of your customers. Just a brief note before we get started. This presentation, we've broken it into 3 parts. Today is part 1, Introduction to Library Science. The presentation is usually 60 to 90 minutes and has a lot of questions from the audience and participants. Being a webinar, I don't expect it's weird. We don't usually get a lot of questions, at least the first time out, but it's a fairly difficult subject matter that is deceptively simple, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later as we get farther down the webinar. This presentation also typically precedes a 2-day workshop that we give to companies when helping prepare their metadata strategy, and it is typically we work with groups that are content writers, tech pubs groups who suddenly have a lot of content in a database, in a content management system. Hundreds of thousands of data topics happen very, very quickly, and being able to find and locate them and have the whole group file them the same way can be kind of difficult if you're getting started and you don't have someone there to help you. So it's a lot of information. It's deceptively simple. But making that transition from writer to library scientist can be a complex transition. It's not necessarily always an easy one. Usually it happens to almost everybody in our workshops during that workshop period. Sometimes it comes on a little bit later, but there's always at least a couple of people during the workshop who like totally make the switch and are able to help the rest of their team, which is very, very cool to see. Okay, so all of that said, let's get started. We're going to just do a brief introduction to library science, what it is, where it functions, why it's important, and then we'll continue on in part 2 next month. So here's the situation. We all have content. They want it. They have content, and we want it. Right? How does anybody find what they need? When we're talking about we and they, it very much depends on who we're talking about. In any organization, the we's and the they's are many. We are the tech pubs writers who are putting books together. We are the marketing and web team who's putting the website together. We are the support group who's put the knowledge base together. We are the engineers writing specs, writing functional specs, writing part messages on the software, writing UIs. We are regulatory affairs who are dealing with legal and with government agencies. We're legal, writing policies and copyrights that need to be everywhere. All right, we are a lot of different people, and they are all those same people, including our end users, the customers who are reading our information and using our products. Right? So the question is, how do any of these groups find what they need to do the best job for the customer, ultimately, in the end? There's a lot of different ways to go with this problem, and if you look at pretty much anyone, you will see all of these terms and many, many more. Just doing a simple, how do I store data in my content management system? How do I facilitate search? You will get faceted search, you'll get big data, you'll get subject scheme, you'll get taxonomy, you'll get classification, you get cataloging and categorization. There's all of these structures. In addition, we've got multiple groups defining things in multiple ways. Marketing may look at things in one way, while tech pubs look at them another, and your customer looks at them a totally different way. And not all classifications work for all of those groups. For example, there's a spider crawling down the wall in my office. If I want to identify this spider, if I'm a scientist, I can work through the scientific classification structure. Kingdom, phylum, family, genus, I don't even know the order because I'm not a scientist, right? And then I can come to what spider this likely is. But I'm not a scientist. That classification scheme doesn't help me. I want to be able to say he's got a round body and really long legs, or he's got a 2-part body, or he's a little furry, or he has, he's got something else on him, right? He's got the classic red hourglass shape. No, he doesn't really. But, right, so I need to go at it. I will come at it a different way as an end user, looking at the spider, trying to identify it, right? So the scientific classification doesn't help me, although it is rigidly structured, extremely hierarchical, very comfortable for all of us wanting to learn how to classify the spider. Well, I'll go to the hierarchy and figure out where he belongs. That might make me feel comfortable, but it doesn't give me the answer to the spider question, who's currently now halfway down the wall in my office. So, right, because I either want to take him outside and set him free, or I poison the spider and I want to dump him in the toilet. So, how do we address this problem? And so we go to library science to help deal with this situation. When I said earlier that librarians are not experts in subjects, they're not, right? They're experts in finding information, right? Because that's a hell of a lot of work. If we were going to implement a classification scheme and a taxonomy and subject scheme and, we would be doing a whole lot of work for a long, long time and wondering whether all that work is giving us the value we're spending on it, right? And can we take 3 years off to catalog and classify our information before we can start work? No, of course we can't. We got to get that book out tomorrow. We got to get it out next week. We don't have time to wait for all of those things to happen. So, isn't it an easier way? And the answer is yes. We go to library science because librarians are the original information architects. They specialize in classifying, locating, storing, retrieving information. This is what librarians do. Right? They are not experts in any of the subjects or all of the subjects in the library. They are experts in how the library works. Right? If you want to translate it into TechPub's terms, they are experts in their content management system. They're expert in how information is classified and stored and how to retrieve it to get the exact thing you want. Right? This is what a librarian does. So I have a friend, she works as a reference librarian, and in fact, she works with us typically in the workshops, and she says, so somebody called the library, and they were looking for information on the value of a particular electrical setting for this test they're taking. And she says, I have no idea what that is, but I was able to help him in less than an hour and get him his answer. So how does she do this? Well, when he called, he says, I'm taking a state test. It is this state test. It's electrical something rather test. They have a question on it. It's about this kind of circuit or this kind of implementation, and they want to know what the answer is. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't even know where to go to look for the answer. How do I find the answer? She didn't know either. But she had a bunch of different ways to go at the question. So she goes and she looks through the library. She goes through all of her reference databases. She goes through everything she has access to as a reference librarian. And she goes at it a couple of different ways. And within an hour, she'd called him back. Within a half an hour, she'd called him back and said, okay, I don't know the answer to your question, but here's a group that does training, or they focus on professional certifications for this same type of test you're talking about. If you call them, they will be able to tell you what the answer is and where to find it. And 15 minutes later, after he'd talked to them, he called her back and said, yeah, you know what? They knew the answer. Here's the answer. And they told me where to go get more information. Right? So he was on his way in less than an hour, right, from someone who is absolutely not a subject matter expert to doing what he needed to do. All right? This is a very key point to know. Librarians keep the content, they curate it, they move it around, they change the categorization structures periodically, they preserve the content, they organize it, they make it findable and ultimately help people find content units. Right? They are the people who make sure someone can find the answer to their question. Right? And if you're looking at implementing metadata strategy in a content management system, you are forcing this issue. You are figuring out how to help people who are looking for content units find the answers they seek. Okay, so Library science tells us that making content discovery happen, it's all about creating and using effective access points. Access points are anything that you would want to use as a way to fetch information, right? So let's think back to when we were small children in our elementary schools. Some of us may not remember these. There was the card catalog. It was literally cards in drawers, in cabinets in the library. And there were 3 of them. There's a subject index, an author index, and a title index. So you could go directly and look up Nathaniel Hawthorne, and you can see all the books related to him. You could see biography information, you could see historical data, where did he live, right? You could go from there to wherever you wanted to go, right? I want to learn about Massachusetts in the time when Hawthorne lived, right? Where go look at Hawthorne, here's born and death, here's his biography, so now I need Massachusetts or wherever it is, right? Okay, so, or you can go to the subject matter index and say, I'm looking about information on the religions and population and percentages in Nigeria. Do you go to world geography, then work your way to Nigeria, or Africa, and then to Nigeria, then to population statistics and religion, and see the various categories? Or do you go to the religion index and look for percentages by world and go straight to Nigeria, right? There's 2 different ways to go at that. The access points and the hierarchical structures are not necessarily the same, right? And it may be far more effective for someone looking for information to start with somewhere farther down the hierarchical chain. I'm going to start in Nigeria because I don't need to look through world then get to Africa because I can start here. I know it's all those things. I don't need to filter that twice. I don't need to do that extra work as a user, right? You certainly don't want your users, if you write software, to have to start with information studies, down to computers, down to operating systems, down to your software, right? You don't want them to have to work that same way through all of my company things, to this, to this, to this, right? You want them to go directly to you, your software, your company, right? So your hierarchical structures don't necessarily function the same way. And forcing your user through that is going to be ultimately futile, just like the spider. Now, most of the way down the wall, I don't even know the structure of biological insects, so it's a non-starter for me, right? Okay, so access points can be anything, really, really anything, as long as it is meaningful to the searcher and the information, right? So terms, obviously easy. Keywords, right? That's an obvious one that we all know about. Phrases are getting more and more important, especially as we're all getting used to Google and Bing. Product numbers. Product numbers are perfect for people who are doing maintenance on information, right? You search under a product number and then all the little pieces of information that have that product number attached to it come up. So you might get a book or different chapters in multiple books or different topics in multiple books in multiple chapters in multiple releases, right? But the product number helps you drill straight into just those topics that matter. You don't have to filter your way through 200 pages to find the one page you care about, right? So we're looking at access points as a way to drill right into the information we want, right? And not have to filter through a bunch of things that are just that we may not know the right structure and end up in the wrong place. Dates. Dates can be very handy too, right? I know I wrote this last summer because I did it just before I left for vacation to France, right? So you can say, okay, that was either July or June because I know it wasn't May. I was doing the other stuff in May. So now I can filter down to just a handful of topics that I have my username attached to it and work in that date period, right? I can drill right into the thing that I want. So access points can be a bunch of different things, anything that's useful, and there are more than one of them, right? Because I can either go through world geography or I can go through Nathaniel Hawthorne or I can go through religion. There's a bunch of different ways to go at something. And being able to mix access points gives us scope, an ability to either filter up or filter down, to either add more results to our search set or to filter more of them out. Right, I'm looking for Spanish children's books. Do I start with children's material and then look at the Spanish subsection on the shelf, or do I go to the Spanish section of the library and look for the children's section? right? It could be either one. It could be both. The buckets really are irrelevant. What buckets we have are kind of doesn't matter because it is specific to your information, your company, your information, and your searchers. If your searchers don't search for children's materials, kind of useless to have a children's material bucket, right? It doesn't really matter what the bucket is as long as it's relevant to you. So here's an example. Make sure you take a look at the screen and see the pictures. If you're in the GoToMeeting and checking email or anything by accident, we've got two pictures of a fridge. We can only guess at the organizing principles of the one on the left-hand side. Perhaps each one of those bags is a shopping trip. They're different bags, so probably different stores, right? So all the things from this store are in this bag, all the things are from that store are in that bag, and I know I go to this store to get milk, and I go to that store to get specialty oils and sauces, right? Or specialty vegetable types. So I know that it's in this bag, not that bag. Perfectly valid organizing principles. Absolutely no problem with the fridge on the left. All the condiments go in the door. If it's not a condiment, it doesn't go in the door. Great. Okay. And nothing goes in the drawers ever. Our organizing principle on the right, and you could guess that maybe the left-hand one is a bachelor, but it might not be. Might be somebody who just doesn't cook very often or does specialty things only. Our organizing principle on the right, harder to identify, actually. We've got drinks on multiple shelves. We've got dairy on multiple shelves. We've got different colored things on different shelves. We've got vegetables on one shelf and salad on another shelf. Looks like fruit on one shelf, but canned vegetable, because pickle is vegetable, on a different shelf. Bread always goes on the bottom. Okay, that sounds good. But it's a very different principle. You could organize your fridge by color and put all the red items on one shelf. You'd have strawberries and spaghetti sauce and ketchup all on one shelf. You would have eggs and cheese and milk and mayonnaise all on a different shelf because all the white items, right? You can organize your fridge any way that you want as long as it makes sense to you and serves your purposes. I've got a customer whose wife and he disagree on how the fridge should be organized. She wants it to be organized by usage. Things she uses often go on the shelf that she accesses frequently. He likes things to be organized by height. If it's short, it doesn't go on a big shelf like this cheese wedge on the shelf with the water jug, right? That's something short on a tall shelf. But in her belief, if she uses that cheese all the time, and in fact she has a butter dish, she puts it on the shelf where she gets it all the time, right? It's perfectly valid organizing principles, perfectly valid structures. Either one is fine as long as it makes sense to the people accessing the information and storing it, and they know where it is all the time. Another customer actually told me they'd moved into a new house, and brand new house, and he found this long, skinny drawer in the kitchen. He says, "Oh, this is great." Filled it right up. His wife comes by a little bit later. The drawer, I should tell you, is near the stove. She opened up the drawer and was surprised to find what she did there. He'd filled it with batteries because it was the perfect size for the battery packages. Right? He says, "Well, it's perfect. Fits great. Perfect fit." She's like, "Yeah, but this is the stove. I don't need batteries next to the stove. So let's move the batteries somewhere else." Right? For her, it was an accessible question. Right? Very different organizing principles, very different ways of thinking. It doesn't matter what your principle is as long as you've got the one that is relevant. So that's all we're going to talk about today. This is the end of part one. Next time we're going to get into detail about specific kinds of access points and how they work together. Right, so this is really just an introduction. Next time we're going to get a little more specific, a little bit tighter into the types of access points. There's 6 typical types. And we're going to do that next time. Okay, so be sure and sign up for part 2 and part 3, August and September. So questions. While you type in your questions, we're going to take a look at what's coming up. In the next TC Dojo, obviously, is part 2 of our concepts and techniques of library science. We're going to talk about specific types of access points in more detail. That is the registration link right there. And don't forget to vote for your choice of upcoming session topics. These sessions are for you. Metadata was one of the top topics That's why we're spending 3 sessions on it. But if there's something else you want to learn, tell us. We'll go find an expert to talk about it. It's not about us. This is about you. So please, it's far more interesting and far more fun if you're learning what you want to learn and not what we think you should learn. It is all about you. In the next ArborText TC Dojo, we're talking about best practices for workspaces in ArborText Content Manager and Windchill. This has also had a huge number of votes. We're going to talk about why you use workspaces, how they're for, how you create them, how long you keep them, best practices for managing them, and it's going to be a really good session. Okay, in our next master series, grow your skills to become a TC Dojo master. It doesn't matter if you're on the path, where you are, or what tools you're using. You can network with peers in a real live virtual discussion group. There are members-only benefits. You get minutes of mentoring. You get access to the dojo recordings, the ArborText ones at least, access to the wiki, and you've got your chance to present your specific challenges to a supportive and same recurring member group. It's really interesting and a whole lot of fun and extremely valuable, we found to many customers. It's a confidential, supportive environment where you can get your own information answered, your questions answered. So, and that typically doesn't happen in a webinar. And you can do all that networking. It's just like the discussion between sessions at a conference. Come in, sit down, virtual discussion group. It's actually kind of amazing. All right, thank you for coming. And before we get to the questions, let me make sure to point you to our YouTube channel for TC Dojo because the video for this session will be posted there. If you're looking for a journeyman or if you're an apprentice, contact us. All right, now we'll get to the questions. Thanks.